We just got a massive flood of information regarding some new Natlin weapons, meaning that there's more options for us to explore for character building. On top of that, there's a new web event coming out that's giving us up to 3 free craftables, so you might be curious as to who can best use these weapons and where you might find the most value out of them. Well, look no further, because I will be breaking down each and every one of them, and giving you the best options for possible users and scenarios. I will be covering the 5 craftable weapons, the brand new event catalyst, and Mualani's signature weapon. Some of you are probably wondering if I'm covering Kinich's weapon. Since information on that hasn't appeared yet and it likely won't be released until the second half of version 5.0, I will be making a standalone YouTube short for that later on, so keep an eye out for that if you're interested to learn more. As always, my general disclaimers, timestamps, social media links, and music credits are all down below for your perusal. But without further ado, let's get started! I should probably warn you, I'm not the best at pronouncing foreign words, so I might get some of these wrong. But the first weapon is the craftable sword, Flute of Ezpitzal. It has a 454 base attack, a 69% defense substat, and at R1, when the user casts an elemental skill, their defense increases by 16%. Genshin's refinements usually double the passive between R1 and R5, but since it's not officially out, we can't say for sure. The green number that says 32% at R5 is just my assumption. Anyway, a sword like this has some very clear users, which is just Albedo and Shiori, as they are the only defense scaling sword users. This is actually a great option for those who weren't here for 2.3's event and couldn't get Cinnabar Spindle, or for anyone who didn't pull Chiori's signature weapon, Uraku Misugiri. However, if you have one or both of these weapons, it probably won't be that important to forge. Considering the substat and passive don't do anything special aside from giving you more defense, there aren't really other options for this weapon, so I'm just gonna move on. The next weapon is Footprint of the Rainbow, the new craftable polearm. This weapon has a 510 base attack, a 51.7% defense substat, and the passive is the exact same as the sword. Casting an elemental skill increases defense by 16 to presumably 32%. For the first time in a long time, we have a new polearm that doesn't add to Xiangling's massive polearm collection. As of this video, only one character is a confirmed defense scaler, Yunjin. Most of the time, you're gonna run an ER polearm on her because it addresses her high energy needs. But let's assume you have enough ER from artifacts and are able to reliably burst. At that point, getting more defense stats will be much more valuable, and as such, using this polearm on Yunjin will be a good option. We currently don't have any official information on Kachina's multipliers, but we do know she's a Geo polearm user. Since Geo has a common trend of defense scaling units, it's very possible that she'll also scale on defense. To further support this claim, all 3 of the craftables are weapons that match the weapon classes of our 3 new playable characters, and I'm very confident that these weapons will also be good synergies with those playable characters. So if that's the case, it will be a good free-to-play option for her. The next weapon is the craftable bow, Chainbreaker. It has a 565 base attack and a 27.6% attack substat. For every party member who is from Natlin or has a different elemental type of the user gets 4.8% increased attack. When 3 characters meet these requirements, the user gets an additional 24 elemental mastery. At R5, the assumed bonus is 9.6% attack per stack, along with 48 EM. The wording on this might be a little confusing for some of you, but I am confident my interpretation is correct. This weapon is not telling you to run a rainbow elemental team. However, to maximize the bonus, the weapon user needs to be the sole user of their element. For example, when you run Venti, he's usually a solo Anemo unit. As long as there's no one else in the party who is also Anemo, he can max out the stacks. The Natlin part of this weapon is a way to circumvent the limitation, allowing you to run the same element teammates without losing the bonus. Let's look at an example. If you ran Tighnari on this weapon, and then 2 Electro teammates, then that's 2 stacks. In order to get the 3rd stack, you could run another different element teammate, or you can run a Dendro Natlin character. Kinich is the only example we have, but pairing them together allows Tighnari to max out the stacks while still benefiting from a second Dendro teammate. Of course, I highly doubt these 2 will actually work together in a team comp since they're both on-field units, but this was just to give you an example. There's also another detail that isn't completely clear yet. The first is that when they explain the Natlin party member requirement, it's just stated as a party member, not another party member. This might mean that if you equip this on a Natlin bow user, they might be able to count towards their own stack count. This is further supported by the fact that there's no mention of a 3-stack limit. So if we have a Natlan bow user, and then 3 characters different from their element, that means it's possible to get 4 stacks if the attack buff, increasing that up to 38.4% instead of just 28.8%. This is something we can't confirm just yet because there's no Natlan bow user, but I'm interested to see if this will be the case down the line. Back to my main topic, who else can make best use of this? 2 characters that immediately come to my mind are Childe and Venti. Childe has a main team called the International Comp. This consists of him, Xiangling, Bennett, and an animal user like Sucrose or Kazuha. Since Childe's the only Hydro user, he will get the full buff. I also mentioned before that Venti's usually run in a solo animal slot. Not only can you buff his own damage immensely, but the EM bonus works to buff Swirl. Any other attack scaling characters can technically use this and max out the bonus, but those characters are also ones that like to run with teammates that match their own element. For example, Pyro units like Linny or Yoimiya slot in Bennett for the attack buff and Pyro Resonance. Tighnari likes to run a Dendro support to get the Dendro Resonance and a reliable Deepwood user. But I suppose solo Dendro isn't the worst choice on him. Fischl usually pairs well with a second Electro for the energy resonance. Once again, solo Electro isn't the worst for her, but there are benefits to having a second Electro party member. Ganyu's somewhat of an interesting case. Run her in a freeze comp, and she has her cryo teammates like Shenhe or Rosaria, which limit the bow's potential. But run her in a melt comp, and this weapon gets a lot more value, since you usually run her in solo cryo for this type of team comp. As more Natlan characters release, it'll become more accessible to more and more of these characters. Aeon is confirmed to be Electro, which means Fischl can still use his weapon when she's on the team and still get the Electro Resonance. If Mavuika turns out to be a Bennett power creep, Linny and Yoimiya can replace Bennett, run the weapon, and get all the relevant buffs. Overall, I really like this weapon. It's flexible enough to work with any unit while still having some select favorites that work best with them. The next weapon I'll cover is Earthshaker, which is our craftable claymore. It has a 565 base attack, a 27.6% attack bonus, and for its passive, when a party member triggers a pyro reaction, the user's elemental skill damage is increased by 16% for 8 seconds, and can occur while off-field. At R5, we assume 32% skill damage bonus. Because pyro is an element that can react with every other element, you can theoretically use this on any character. But here are the main limitations. 1. Using this weapon requires a Pyro party member or for the user to be Pyro. 2. The user should have a focus on high skill damage, and while I highly doubt this won't be the case. 3. Running this weapon on a 4-person Pyro comp will naturally prevent you from triggering reactions most of the time, especially if the enemy has no elemental auras. So if you're gonna run mono Pyro, then at least have an Anemo or Geo unit. So now let's cover all the best options. Looking at all the Pyro characters, it's actually not amazing on most of them. Diluc weaves in his skills sometimes, but his damage is also reliant on his basic attacks and his burst. Xinyan's more burst damage and basic attack oriented, and Gaming's skill plunge is considered as plunge attack damage, not skill damage. Ironically, there's only one Pyro user who makes good use of the Pyro reaction Claymore. Okay, I won't oversell this weapon. It's not amazing on Dia, but if you mainly run her as an off-field skill damage dealer instead of her on-field burst damage, this isn't a bad free-to-play option for her. You can also consider Navia, since one of her best teams is double Pyro, double Geo. Of course, a craftable weapon like Tidal Shadow might be a better option, since it buffs all of her attack and not just skill damage. To mention a couple other possible users, Freminade's main source of damage is his skill, so you can use this as long as you run him with a Pyro user, but since running him with a Pyro user isn't as common, I don't think it'll be the best choice for him. And while official info on Kenichi's kit is limited, we did see a little snippet of him in Imaginarium Theater running what seems to be a burning team. It'll also depend on whether his main source of damage is considered skill damage, but just like with Kachina, this Claymore is going to be one of the free ones we get from the web event, meaning it's very likely we'll see it work well with him. The last of the craftables is the Catalyst Ring of Yaxche. Once again, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. This weapon has a 510 base attack, an HP substat of 41.3%, and the passive does the following. When the user casts their skill, they gain a 0.6% normal attack damage bonus for every 1000 max HP they have. This can max out at a 16% damage bonus. Presumably, at R5, the bonus would be a 1.2% bonus per 1000 max HP, with a max of 32% damage bonus. Doing the calculations, in order to get the max bonus, you'd only have to get around 26,667 HP. Anyway, for a general idea on possible users, the best people are going to be A, those with HP scalings, and B, those with normal attack focused kits. And I guess that's just Kokomi for now. If you're going for a free-to-play DPS build, I would generally recommend a weapon like Prototype Amber, just because the energy regen it provides will also allow you to reduce her energy needs. But if you've already managed to get the energy through artifacts, then this weapon can be a better option for her personal damage. For another user, we now have official information that Mualani's damage is not only HP scaling, but also considered normal attack damage. This will of course mean that the craftable catalyst is going to synergize very well with her. If or when we get that free catalyst from the web event, that means you already have an option ready for her. So that's gonna do it for the craftable weapons. The next one is the Ash-Graven Drinking Horn. This was labeled as an event weapon based on the special program. More likely than not, it's also going to be a limited weapon, so make sure to get this before the event ends. It's going to have a 510 base attack and a 41.3% HP substat. Its passive is that when an attack hits an opponent, it does AoE damage equal to 40% max HP, which can occur every 15 seconds. At R5, it's assumed to be 80% max HP. This is a pretty massive hit of damage, and we can assume a few extra things. Like weapons with a similar passive, it's likely the AoE hit will be physical damage, and it's likely it has a potential to crit. So let's move on to the best users. Once again, Mualani is a confirmed HP scaler, so for all of you newer or free-to-play players, you have not one, but two options to work with when Natlin releases. For other possible users, the only other HP scalers we have are Barbara, Kokomi, Baiju, and Neuvillette. For starters, Barbara and Baiju are not DPS units, but their high HP scaling can allow them to dish out occasional hits of damage, especially if other support weapons aren't going to be useful in a particular scenario. Kokomi and Neuvillette are better options, but they usually have better free-to-play options. Once again, Prototype Amber popping up as a generally better alternative. But since this is going to be an event weapon, you can easily R5 it and have something readily on standby. Finally, the 5-star weapon, Surf's Up. This is Mualani's signature weapon, so it's safe to assume it's her best in slot. It has a 542 base attack, an 88.2% crit damage bonus, and a secondary 20% max HP bonus at R1. When the user uses their skill, they get 4 stacks, and each stack will increase normal attack damage by 12%. With a max of 4 stacks, that's 48%. Every 1.5 seconds, when the user deals normal attack damage, they lose a stack. When they trigger Vaporize, they gain a stack. So this weapon is going to be good on HP scaling users, anyone with normal attack damage synergy, and anyone who can trigger Vaporize. Kokomi's normal attacks apply Hydro too fast, so she probably can't Vaporize consistently. Neuvillette's charge attack focused, so this weapon's already not good on him. There are other potential users, but it's still not going to be a good choice. Pyro users like Klee and Yanfei can reverse Vape, but since their normal attacks land faster than the Vapes can trigger, this weapon passive won't be able to maintain max stacks. It'll just slow down the process at which you lose stacks. Plus, Klee's damage is more well-rounded, and Yanfei has a slight focus on charge attack damage. The other set of possible users is animal users because of their ability to swirl vape. It's also good if they have a focus on normal attacks, which would just be Wanderer and Hazo, but Hazo's more skill damage oriented, so I guess just Wanderer. I'm putting the animal users in a category of possible users, but that's nowhere near the same as ideal users. Triggering Vaporize with a swirl reaction is very hard, because there's a lot of tedious setup that goes into doing that. You're unlikely to get stacks, and even if you can, it's the same as the Pyro users. You'll just slow down the process at which you lose them. So honestly, I don't really think any other Catalyst user can make good use of this weapon, aside from it being a stat stick. But let's move back to Mualani. How can she use this weapon so well? While we don't have her multipliers, we do have her animations. The devs describe her as being a slower attacker, and with slow attacking comes slow application. Part of the new media that came out includes clips of her using her skill. In this state, we see that her collision doesn't apply Hydro, only the Shark Bite and missile attacks do. Through the more staggered attacks and slow application, her ability to deal normal attacks and trigger Vaporize will happen at the same time. Doing so causes her to not only lose a stack, but regain it at the same time, thereby allowing her to maintain all 4 stacks. When she officially releases, I'll have a video on her where I further analyze her kit, so keep an eye out for that. Overall, these weapons provide a decent amount of bonuses to specific niche categories. There's a lot of characters who either get a buff from these weapons, or at the very least a viable alternative. While most of these are nothing meta-defining, these will serve as great free-to-play options for anyone struggling to find the right weapons for their characters. Alright, that's gonna do it for this video. If you enjoyed, consider leaving a like and subscribing to support the channel. Let me know in the comments, are you gonna be crafting any of the new weapons or pulling the new 5-star catalyst? If you are, let me know who you plan to use it on. Thanks again for watching everyone, and I will see you all next time. Bye!